last time there was an increase of 15% of segregation of Roma children in education, and that's terrible news. And it affects, I think Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, perhaps also Hungary and Czechia, and at least Hungary, Czechia, and Slovakia are also still under the infringement proceedings at the European Union because of discrimination of Roma children in education. And in April, I think.
Welcome to the Amaro Voice podcast. Amaro is from the Romani language, means our Roma, Sinti and Roma voice among Europe. Today I will interview Dan Doghi. Hello Dan Doghi, thank you for your time, and of course you can introduce yourself.
Hello Sin, hi. Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be part of your podcast. My name is Dan Doghi. I'm from Romania, from Cluj-Napoca, which is somewhere middle of Transylvania. My beginnings in the civil society are in the early 90s, where I started to work and conduct various activities in my hometown in Cluj-Napoca, and then soon after that I established with my father an NGO, non-governmental organization called Amare Prala, our brothers. And with it, we implemented something like more than 20 projects in various areas of life, starting from access to education, human rights, police violence, professional training, activities to facilitate integration into the labor market, assessment of the situation of Roma communities, and so on. Then somewhere in 98, with a number of few other Roma students, we established a Roma students organization in Cluj-Napoca. The organization was named Romano Suno. And then, yes, with that organization, we've been active for a good number of years, doing all sorts of activities, but also promoting human rights and respect for human rights. Then I started in 2000 to work in a sort of spin-off foundation in my hometown at the Resource Center for Roma Communities. And I was a program coordinator there. And my first program was to support the most active Roma NGOs in the country and help establish a Roma national network. And then build their capacity, organize regular meetings and events, and so on. In 2004, I joined a Budapest-based organization called Public Interest Law Initiative, or PILI, known at that time, as an advocacy fellow in the training and education department. And I worked there to document the situation of segregation of Roma children in education in a number of countries in Europe, and also facilitate the organization of national and regional roundtables on this specific topic. One of our partners was European Roma Rights Center.
So it was September 2004 when I joined OSCE, ODIHR, Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, where I worked as an officer within the contact point for Roma and Sinti Issues, which was led at that time by Nicolae Gheorghe. and I worked with him for 2 years until he retired. Then I continued for another 5 years with Andrzej Mirga, who became Nicolae's successor. So I worked for all in all for 7 years because OSCE is a non-career organization, and that was the maximum of years that was allowed for a professional contractee. After that, I joined the Roma Education Fund, the headquarters in Budapest, as a higher education program manager, and I was responsible for Roma Education Fund's scholarship scheme for tertiary education Roma students in 16 countries. So I run the program, awarding every year 2 million euro for approximately 1,500 Roma students. Besides that, I also developed a professional development scheme. So the awardees of the scholarship also received additional support to grow their capacities and skills and aptitudes, attend all sorts of training, summer camps, seminaries, conferences, but also participate in language courses and get certificates, computer courses. And on top of that, I also developed a small scale support scheme to support initiatives of the Roma students implemented at local level, and in most cases exactly from where they originated. So back in their communities, so to speak. Then, so from 2012 to 2017, I worked as a higher education program manager. In that period, actually from 2013 to 2015, I also occupied a position of country national director of Roma Education Fund in Romania, where I've overseen the implementation of two large structural funds projects supporting and facilitating access of Roma children to education. These projects amounted to, I think, 4.8 billion euro. So I was responsible to ensure successful contracting, implementation, monitoring, and reporting of these two projects. And after all these processes have been successfully completed, then I stayed only with my original position as a higher education program manager. After my departure from Roma Education Fund, I rejoined in 2018. I rejoined the OSCE in Warsaw. This time I became the chief of the contact point for Roma and Sinti Issues, and I worked there for 3 years because in OSCE, as I mentioned, being a non-career organization, one could only have a maximum of 10 years of tenure, be it cumulated or consecutive. So I left from there, and I immediately joined the European Commission in the Director General of Justice and Consumers, where I occupied the position of the team leader for Roma coordination, being in charge of cooperating with the other directorates and services of the Commission of direct relevance for the Roma policies and to support the implementation of the 2020-2030 EU Roma strategic framework. And for that matter, we also worked very closely with governments, particularly with national Roma contact points. I've overseen also the process of assessing the newly developed and adopted national Roma inclusion strategies. And I produced a communication, European Commission communication, assessing the correspondence between these new national strategies with the EU Roma strategic framework and also the correspondence with its seven objectives and with the 3 horizontal objectives, as well as with the targets that the member states are expected to achieve by 2030. So I occupied that position until June last year because I had a temporary agent contract. And since last summer, I rejoined after 20 years. I've rejoined my hometown. And I'm currently consulting and cooperating with some small civil society organizations. And of course, I'm still continuing to find a job that is suitable and is matching with my experience and expertise so that I can give the most of what I have. Ideally, in continuation to support Roma inclusion and human rights, the rights of Roma, but also I feel I can offer a lot in any areas dealing with equality, inclusion, cohesion, non-discrimination, anti-racism, anti-gypsyism, anti-discrimination, access to education, remembrance and reconciliation, recognition of the Roma Holocaust, and so on.
Thanks for watching us. If you want to support us, you can like this video and give us a comment. And to not miss our episodes, you can subscribe our YouTube channel. If you are watching or listening right now on Spotify or listen on Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts, you can follow our podcast. To get all information from us, go and follow us on Instagram and TikTok, Amaro Voice. You described Roma in an article as an invisible nation. What do you mean by that, and how does this invisibility manifest in human rights terms today?
Well, that was the title with which I agreed, yeah, but it was proposed by my old friend Orhan Tahir. Yes, we indeed, I had quite a long interview about the situation of Roma in Europe, and yes, I mean there is an aspect of invisibility, if you want to consider it as such, in the sense of the rights of Roma being achieved or respected, and the disconnect that exists between the political pledges, if you want, the European strategies and frameworks for Roma inclusion, as well as the national Roma inclusion strategies. So the disconnect between these two and the reality and the situation of Roma on the ground. So we already have maybe 2 decades of such policies and strategies, paired also with a lot of, let's say, good practices piloted here and there as models that could be adopted and further replicated, paired also with significant financial support that it's offered by European Union, by Norway grants and other, let's say, international donors to transpose the good things that exist in these European frameworks for Roma and national Roma inclusion strategies into reality. And this transposition still lacks, and that's very easy to observe. If you check the latest EU Fundamental Rights Agency's Roma surveys and reports, the 2016 report clearly indicated that there is a very modest and small progress, despite all these strategies and funding made available to support Roma inclusion. And even from 2016 to the next 2019 Fundamental Rights Agency report, there is a very limited progress, and also the most recent one, 2021 EU Fundamental Rights Agency report, which again makes also a comparison between the situation as identified in 2016 versus 2021, and it says very clearly the progress is extremely limited. So I've always said that our biggest problem is not us, and especially after 20 years of attempted policies and strategies and interventions and money thrown to support implementation of all these interventions, there is still no adequate progress, because one of the main problem, which is racism, is not dealt with properly. There is a widespread impunity, if you want, of racism that manifests casually in our societies, and there is no much difference between Eastern Europe or Southeastern Europe and Western Europe. So you don't see big differences, which perhaps one would expect, in the sense that in the more advanced democracies, such manifestations would be at low level, but it's not a case. When we speak about Roma, as it is observed widely, it doesn't matter in which part of Europe you look, the treatment of the Roma population is pretty much similar, and it's one which is very bad. There is still a systemic and structural racism and discrimination. There is a lot of prejudice, hatred, rhetoric, and you can see it especially during elections, just before and during, where this is almost weaponized. You can find expressions and manifestations of racism not only on the extreme right part of the political spectrum, but also among the central or conservators or liberals or social democrats. I mean, the treatment continues to be one that allows these manifestations to occur without much consequence. That's, I think, the biggest problem that we are facing. So as long as this issue of racism and rejection, or sometimes extreme hatred towards the Roma is not addressed properly and genuinely, doesn't matter how good the strategies are or if you have mountains of money, the problem won't be resolved.
So, what are the most urgent human rights challenges Roma and Sinti communities are facing across Europe in 2025? Have you seen any significant progress or setbacks recently?
Progress, it's very hard to demonstrate. If there is some progress, I think the one area where more progress has been observed or registered is in the area of education, but even there, not all aspects relating to education. So there is an increase in participation of Roma children in kindergarten activities. Yeah, so that has been a progress, and in a number of countries where there is at least 1 year of mandatory kindergarten before enrolling in the primary school, this has been seen as a good measure that has helped this increase. Yeah. And because of that, then Roma children attending at least that 1 year of mandatory preschool, they are a little bit better equipped to deal with the educational requirements in the primary school. Therefore, chances for them to cope better and closer to normal are bigger, and on the other hand, that chances for lagging behind or being unmotivated and therefore abandon education are lower. So here you can see an increase. Perhaps there is also an increase of Roma youth graduating from the gymnasium, let's say the mandatory 8 years of education, and entering high school education. In some countries, this measure of places for Roma youth in high schools, sometimes also paired with some places in universities, has helped. But in the same time, when we speak about education, the Fundamental Rights Agency report, as well as the European Commission reports, has found and has warned and signaled the member states that there is an increase in segregation. So last time there was an increase of 15% of segregation of Roma children in education, and that's terrible news. Yeah? And it affects, I think Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, perhaps also Hungary and Czechia, and at least Hungary, Czechia, and Slovakia are also still under the infringement proceedings at the European Union because of discrimination of Roma children in education. And in April, I think 2019, April 2023, Slovakia was, after so many years, I think, the infringement proceedings started in 2014, and then it took 9 years or so until the European Commission or the European Union has exhausted all its legal and policy and procedural steps to help Slovakia get rid of that situation of discrimination. But eventually it realized that the progress is just not there, and Roma children continue, after so long, to be discriminated and segregated. So it referred Slovakia to the European Court of Justice. So the proceedings are ongoing. So when we speak about education, you have some degree of success, but you still have a continuing heritage of discrimination, of exclusion, and of segregation. Human rights wise, unfortunately, I don't think there is much progress. If anyone can have such examples, I would be happy to learn, because that would mean that more Roma can exercise and benefit of their rights. But I'm afraid we are not there, and we are not there because there is still a high degree of impunity of crimes perpetrated with a basis of prejudice and bias and racist towards Roma, which is not punished. There is no consequence. There is no legal consequence. So then people feel like, oh, we can say and we can do whatever we want. I mean, look, there is no consequence. Why should we bother? Because anyway, we don't like them. Yeah? I mean, Roma are still felt as being outsiders, not organically being part of the societies where they lived for hundreds of years. Yeah? So, or we live in on the European continent for a millennium, but I mean, so many are still shouting, "You gypsies, go back to India!" Yeah. So we are considered as outsiders. We are sort of outcasts. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest problems why all these strategies, policies, be them European or at national level, they continue to fail in achieving their goals.
Learning Romani language. So on Amaro Voice, we have a rubric called Learning Romani Language. We would like to share with our guests the dialects and also have in 2 words to share how we say. So I would like to ask you, which dialect do you speak?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a native Romani language speaker, although my parents they spoke it natively. I am as origin Romungre, so my original dialect would be Romungre, but because I didn't learn it from them and they didn't taught us the Romani language, so because they in their thinking they wanted to avoid us being treated differently or being discriminated or harassed or bullied or whatever disconsidered. Yeah? So they decided so, but I've learned it when in my teenagehood when I became interested about Roma, and then later on I got involved in civil society, and then I was because of being curious. I started to learn it from in a sort of a mixed manner. So I've learned also partially from the manuals that were using the standard international standard version, as promoted by Marcel Curtiade and in Romania by Professor Gheorghe Sarău, but also with my encounters with various Roma activists. When I started to work with Nicolae Gheorghe at Romani Cris in Bucharest in 1996. So that's how I learned it. And then when I joined the OSCE in 2004, then I've started to be exposed a lot to Roma people from all Europe, including from the Balkans. So that's how I also met your dad. So I've learned also quite a lot about the various dialects in the Balkans. Yeah.
So I speak the Ali dialect, so it's the dialect maybe from the Balkans, speaking in Serbia, North Macedonia, Kosovo, and maybe also other countries now in Western Europe because of the migration because of the Balkan Wars, but also in example from the Balkans in Germany during the 1780s came a lot of guest worker, and yes, and also greetings to you from my dad. I just talked to him today. I will interview you, and also when I met you at the Roma Week at the European Parliament, because my dad always asked me, who is there? And then he said, oh, you, because in the 90s he was activist and journalist in Kosovo. So, yeah.
Yeah, I met him in Pristina in 1996. Yeah, I was there, sent by Nicolae Gheorghe to attend in an event organized by Vladimir Matsura, an architect, who was studying Surdulica and Masurica examples of neighborhood and how this neighborhood could be helped to, become prosperous, well connected with ingenious approaches to infrastructure, to transportation, and so on. So at that time, because I was then, I left from Pristina, I met your father and his colleague, who were responsible for the TV, the Roma TV broadcast, and they took my interview and we had a good time and we discussed. So yeah.
So imagine in '96 that I was just 4 there. So I will start with the first word. It's red.
Lolo.
Yeah.
We say Lolo.
Yeah, we say also Lolo, and if it can be also Loli.
Yeah, it depends.
Yeah,
it depends whether it's masculine, feminine. Yes. Yeah.
And the second word is apple.
Yeah, pabai.
Pabai. And the second, the third. So we use also phrases, not just words. How would you say "How are you"?
Sarsan.
Okay.
But you see, I'm saying Sarsan or Sarsian because this is more or less the international. But in my Romungre version, and that's quite peculiar. You don't find it in many places. But I saw traces of it for some dialects in Czechia and Slovakia, and actually a direct connection to Hindi. We say Sarhan.
Yeah, we say Sarhian.
Yeah, Sarhian, Sarhan.
In Ali dialect. Yes. And it's also interesting because I was interviewing a Sinti from Germany, Bitzeli, and they say also Sarhan.
Yeah,
interesting. So similar.
It's not very often, but yes, some groups are still.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
and it's not only that, but this particle of age is used in many, like we don't say, or Romungre don't say devlesa, as it is more commonly known, but they say devleha or devlehe.
Yeah, we say also devlea.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was learning Romani language. Learning Romani language. So you have emphasized the importance of data, disaggregated data by ethnicity in particular. Why is it so difficult to collect this data in many European countries, and what are the risks of not having it?
Well, I mean, it depends who you ask. If you ask the states and institutions, you will hear very often a pretext, which is intentional. Or sometimes you will hear statements that denote the lack of knowledge of certain things. Yeah. But very often it's a pretext, and I'll explain what. Yeah. So maybe you're familiar, I think you are familiar with the situation of census and the huge differences between the official census and the numbers of Roma versus the unofficial, which is then a combination of sociological, demographic, anthropological estimations and analyses, and you have huge differences. So in Romania, I think now it's like 500 something, maybe 520,000 or something. It's a decrease from the previous one when we were, I think, 600,000. But that's the official. It means people declare themselves as Roma. Yeah. Unofficially, and that's pretty, quite widely accepted, including by the government, and as well as by all international organizations or intergovernment organizations. It's 1.5, 1.8 million Roma, yeah, in Romania. So it's a huge difference. And then, yeah, it's curious because this is also happening in most of the countries where Roma live. And there are reasons for that. Yeah. Uh, uh, One is our past, where we've been targeted for extermination by the Nazi regime, their allies and collaborators. Yeah? And there was a high degree of success in extermination of Roma. Maybe at least a third of the entire European population ended up being killed by the Nazi ideology and machine and so on. So there is always a huge reluctance of Roma declaring themselves as being Roma because of being afraid that such policies can be reenacted, and then they will be at the end of persecution. So it's because of this fear, but also because of fear of persecution or discrimination or being treated, differently and less equal. That's from the side of the Roma. Then, from the side of authorities, there is almost a sinister reasoning, which is not declared, obviously, but I believe we can state it as such. If you imagine you're a government and you have to build your budget, so you have to allocate for certain things a budget which is fairly accurate in terms of dimension. Yeah. So if you have a population of 10,000 Roma, then you allocate a budget for their inclusion, integration, or whatever. Yeah, which is for 10,000. Okay, but if you have 100,000 of Roma, then you have to spend more money, and it's notorious that governments are allocating and implementing, for decades, very small amounts for Roma. Actually, in the past 20 years or so, if there is any progress, and there are certain progresses that we can speak about, and it's mostly about legal framework, political frameworks, policy frameworks, and so on, and funding established and offered, and so on. So much of the progress can be attributed to the international pressure, yeah, including EU accession and so on. You want to become part of the big club of the European Union, there are certain criteria because we promote democracy. We have European values. If you don't align, if you don't comply with, you have no place in our club. Yeah. So it's not because of their genuine interest of the countries, because we are still facing the same problems: societal rejection, prejudice, rampant racism, and structural discrimination. This didn't change much. Right? So we know how we are felt in our countries. So it's because of this kind of constraints that some things have moved and have developed positively, not necessarily because of the good heart or because the states were doing it because it's the right thing to do. I would like the things to be as such, but let's be honest, it's not the case. Yeah. So obviously they have an interest in the background to keep it lower, because then whatever resources they have to allocate, they don't have to allocate to the real size of the population. Yeah. So it's saving money, if you want. So they can be directed to other priorities. Roma pretty much not featuring among the top priorities. Yeah. So you have this problem. This my end statements are connected to data collection. Yeah. Then, yeah, if you collect data about racism, about hate motivated incidents, yeah, then, and I'm speaking about Romania because it's easy. Yeah, I mean, most of those, if it's hate incident and racism, that's Roma, and there is widespread racism and racially motivated incidents. So only a responsible state would conduct thorough work of identifying and collecting data and reporting of this phenomena. Because what the countries often they try to hide the negative aspects. Yeah, so you would need a highly responsible state to acknowledge that, yeah, we don't like it. We generally want to get rid of this phenomenon, but the reality is this, and we've done properly our homework, and this is the situation. Yeah, so obviously they have an interest to keep these kind of things low. Yeah, unemployment, segregation in education. Yeah, the countries are not very proud of this kind of things, so they're not so keen in properly and thoroughly documenting, because then they will have to show, and they will look bad. Yeah. So again, it's the EU Fundamental Rights Agency and the European Commission putting pressure and using all sorts of political mechanisms to identify and raise awareness of this data. On the other hand, there are some legal prohibitions in certain countries where collection of ethnic data is really prohibited. I think that's the case of Germany, yeah, but some countries also. So there you have limitations, yeah. But even there, I don't think there is a total limitation, because from the European level, from the EU level, there is a demand and direct request from states, from European Commission towards the member states to collect data, because data lies at the basis of any policy. Yeah? You build a policy based on evidence. So data means evidence. Yeah. And in order to build sound policies, you need sound evidence. Yeah. And of course, the European Union, the European Commission is fully aware of the vulnerabilities and of misuse or abuse in the data collection processes that can harm people, and therefore it made it very clear that on one hand you have the obligation to collect data, but also on the other hand you have the obligation to safeguard the data. Yeah, and it's clearly explained how you can safeguard the data so that the data is secured, is anonymized, yeah, it's disaggregated, so it's only the relevant aspects that are put together, corroborated, compiled, so that it produces the necessary evidence to either build and develop policy, so the policy making processes, as well as for the policy analysis, policy reform, yeah, policy evaluation, and so on. So many countries and institutions say, but we cannot collect because it's forbidden. Yeah. So, and you have the dual situation there. Yeah. Some because they are not knowledgeable on these kind of things that I just shared. Yeah. Or the others that are using it as a pretext because of the other reasons I've mentioned to you. So there is a need for a constant reminder from the European Union towards the member states that data collection is essential for policy making and for policy review, to assess progress, to calibrate the interventions so that they are adequate, they are proper, and also to be able to make the proper financial allocations.
So we are almost coming to the end. Do you have any anecdotes, like short anecdote, you you would like to share with us? Can be related to your work, can be a serious story, can be also the funny story during
Yeah,
your activism.
funny. Yeah, funny story. Uh, there was a Roma activist from the old generation who passed away. Uh, but he used to make this kind of jokes about Egypt and the Roma, and said, Ramses, yeah. So Ramses, Ramsas, So, and Tutankhamun, of course, Tutarkamau, and he was doing all these sort of word jokes. So, yeah, I mean, what other anecdote? It doesn't come to my mind now, but
I think that's
yeah.
enough. This okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for your time. Do you have any closing words?
Well, to our Roma fellow, Saure, Taven Saste, Bachtale, Zurale, te Avasketanes, pe Amarei Buti, temarasu rasismo, temarasi discriminația, amen nai butzarele akana, kai amen nasam ketane. Kadasi bari problema, amende dikav pemurosuno kai ande avudno, kodo celo shai avelo chacho.
Thanks for watching or listening. Ciao and devlesa.
Devlesa, devlehe.
This podcast is funded by the Stiftung Erinnerung, Verantwortung und Zukunft EVZ as part of the project Amaro Voice, digitale Bildungsarbeit über die Communities der europäischen Sinti und Roma bei der NGO Medien- und Kulturzentrum Deutscher Roma e.V.